Watch yoga videos ad-free and practice uninterrupted. Try YouTube Premium on us.
What's the easiest way to get in touch with nature? Do you just head into the woods? Live off the land? No, nature is cruel. Just book a holiday house on hotels.com. You leave...
Right, welcome people. Greetings. Greetings. We are going to read some more of this Children of the Sun. So, this is Children of the Sun, Chapter 7, The Search for Gold and Pearls, North America. The discussions of the relations between food producers and food gatherers suggested that throughout the region, the food producers were constantly advancing into the lands of the food gatherers and dispossessing them of their hunting grounds. Given this gradual outward movement of civilization, how is it to be explained? What impelled the food producers to occupy new lands? And what selective agency caused them to choose certain spots for settlement and to neglect others? Fortunately, it is possible to study in two places on the boundary between food producers and food gatherers. The phenomenon of the advance of civilization into new regions is as well known. It is well known that the great colonization of California and Australia by Europeans only began in the latter half of the century, prior to which both countries were but sparsely inhabited by stock breeders. Although the analogy between the archaic civilization and that of Western Europe in the 19th century is not exact, yet it is close enough to serve as a rough guide. Turn that down a little bit. It is perhaps not properly realised by all what an important part has been played in the near past by discoveries of gold. California came into prominence only when it was discovered to be a rich gold region. The Spaniards, ignorant of its gold, tried to colonise it, but with no success. Prior to 1848, when gold was discovered, the country was given over to Spanish priests, mission Indians, and a few American settlers, traders, and trappers. But once the presence of gold was known, multitudes flocked there, and the population increased in the year 1850 by 100,000. The gold boom, of course, in time died down, and the country was then forced to develop its agricultural resources. The same story can be told of Australia. The native population is in the hunting stage. One sec. Is in the hunting stage, although signs exist of the presence there in the past of a superior civilization. Before 1850, men went thither for the sake of breeding sheep upon its monotonous plains, and had no other attraction been discovered, the island continent of the south would have remained until now a slow-moving, cityless country of pastoral settlers, possibly from the lack of brisk sea trade now established, still shearing their flocks and boiling down their sheep and cattle as the only means of utilising their surplus produce, in exchange for the more or less indispensable commodities of other countries. But the discovery of gold at once changed the scene. Settlers and ships came thick and fast. New lines of commerce tracked the deep. Already the European race is making a new home at the antipodes, and a brilliant future has opened up. Opened upon that southern continent, of whose greatness we only see the beginning. So wrote an author in 1882. He goes on to say that the bulk of this vast emigration came from Europe, the heart of modern civilization, most fully possessed of the means and appliances of the migration. As a remarkable example of the way in which the discovery of gold will attract people from their homeland, it is noteworthy that the Chinese are to be found in their numbers, when the immigration laws permit, on every goldfield in the world, whether in Australia, the Malay Peninsula, Borneo or California. In non-auriferous parts of the world they are not so prominent. If a photographer of 5,000 years hence should discover ruins upon the upper reaches of the Yukon, he would probably wonder what could have induced men to live in such an inhospitable plot. He may speculate about changes of climate, or he may try to give some other reason, but the remarkable nature of the place will probably force him to conclude that some definite cause led men to live there. If he turns to the study of the customs of the people of that remote age, he will find that they desired gold above all things, not because it had a surpassing intrinsic merit in itself, but because it was a medium of exchange, and could enable a man to minister his selfish desires and obtain a fuller measure of life than his fellows. He would then turn back to the Yukon Valley and conclude that the presence there of the gold in the past constituted a sufficient cause for the presence of civilized peoples. And although he did not see splendid stone buildings and all the apertures of civilization in such a spot, he would nevertheless be prepared to conclude that the gold miners came from more civilized regions. But that, being there to exploit the gold, and not intending to remain longer than they could help, they made shift with what sufficed for the needs of the moment. So even if there be no direct signs of a high form of civilization connected with the ancient mining works in any given place, that in itself is no evidence that the miners were of low culture. They would not have had the time, nor the labour, nor the incentive to construct great works. It is a commonplace that the presence of minerals of such forms has largely determined the distribution of population in more developed countries. In England, the greatest concentrations are on the coal and iron fields, with the exception of London, and the same is the case elsewhere. In England, the greatest concentrations are on the coal and iron fields, with the exception of London, and the same is the case elsewhere. In the United States, there is an interesting example of the way in which new regions can be occupied with dense populations in a short time. The part of Pennsylvania containing the main supply of oil was barren, rocky soil, practically uninhabited, until the discovery of oil in the middle of the last century. Immediately after the discovery, it was transformed into a thriving region, full of large towns, all drawing their prosperity and wealth from the stores of oil in the earth. The discovery of the use of this oil as an illuminant thus brought new centre of civilization into being. I now propose to put forward evidence that the same motive must have led to the foundation of civilizations in the places that have already come under review. To begin with America and work westwards. In North America, it is necessary to account for the first Maya cities in Guatemala, Honduras, and southern Mexico, for the Pueblo settlements, and for the distributions of the mounds. In the eastern states, I shall begin with the Pueblo region. The culture of the Pueblo Indians is so closely related to that of Mexico as to suggest that one of them must have been derived from the other. Since the Pueblo folk cultivate maize, which originated south of the Rio Grande, it seems certain that they derived their civilization from Mexico. Another good reason exists for this belief. Turquoise was a favourite precious stone amongst the Indians, the Maya, and the Pueblo Indians. In all three provinces, the turquoise found both a religious and an ornamental use, and there are striking analogies between the application among widely spread separated tribes. Since no turquoise is known in Mexico itself or in the country to the south, the Mexicans must either have gone themselves to the Pueblo region to get it, or they must have got it in by trade. Turquoise occurs in a natural state in New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado, and California. The principal sources being near Cerrillos in Cochise County, New Mexico, 25 miles south of Santa Fe. Little Burro Mountains and Little Hachita Mountains, Grant County, New Mexico, La Cruces, Donna Ana County, New Mexico, Mineral Park, Arizona, Aztec Mountains, Arizona, La Jara, Comejos County, Colorado, Taylor's Ranch, Fresno County, California, and Cottonwood, San Bernardino County, California. At a number of these deposits were remains of ancient working pits, shafts, tunnels, and stopes, with dumps of waste rock made by Indians or other early inhabitants of the southwest. The places with old workings are Los Cerrillos, Little Burro, and Little Hachita Mountains, Little Cruces, Aztec Mountains, San Bernardino County, California. Presumptive evidence that the ancient Mexicans worked with the turquoise mounds of the Pueblo region is given by the following quotation. That the ancient Mexicans held the turquoise in high esteem is well known, and that the Los Cerrillos mines were extensively worked prior to the discovery of America. Is proved by fragments of Aztec pottery, vases, drinking, eating, and cooking utensils, stone hammers, wedges, nails, and idols discovered in the debris found everywhere. The following quotation gives an idea of the extent of the operations. On reaching the locality, I was struck with astonishment at the extent of the excavation. It is an immense pit with precipitous sides of angular rock, projecting in crags which sustain a growth of pines and shrubs in the fissures. On one side, the rocks tower to the precipice and overhang so as to form a cave. At another place, the side is low and formed of the barren rocks which were removed, broken rocks which were removed. From the top of the cliff, the excavation appears to be 200 feet in depth, formed by the sloping banks of the debris or fragments of the sides. On this debris, at the bottom of the pit, pine trees over 100 years old are now growing, and the bank of refuse made in the solid rock and tens of thousands of tons of rock have been broken out. This is not the only opening. There are several pits in the vicinity, more limited in extent, some of them being apparently much more recent. The evident antiquity of this excavation and its extent renders it particularly interesting. Peculiarly interesting. Little or nothing appears to be known of it in that region, and I am not aware that it has ever been visited except by Indians and New Mexicans. It seems hardly possible that such an amount of rock could have been removed by men without the aid of powder and machinery. The evidences were, however, conclusive that it was the work of the Aborigines long before the conquest and settlement of the country by the Spaniards. Recently, several caves in the mountain have been unearthed, extending from the level of the long-abandoned mine. The Wonder Caves are about 25 feet from the surface and run 100 feet from the apex of the mountain by about 30 by 25 feet in width and from 6 to 8 feet in height above the debris. This group resembles in shape the 5 fingers of the hand. Here were found numerous veins of turquoise from 1/8 of an inch to 2 inches in thickness, and strips of gold-bearing quartz to cover the walls of the central cave. It is presumed that further explorations would bring to light openings through these walls, showing that the entire mountain was honeycombed by the ancients, and the pillars left by them to support the roof. Quartz veins were worked for gold in the same district. In the mountains known as Los Cerrillos, about 8 miles from the new placer, there is a deserted mine, known among the old Mexicans as La Mina del Oro, the true character of which could not be well determined. It certainly is very ancient, and there is no record or tradition concerning it, except that the work was done before the insurrection, which took place in 1680. The principal shaft is over 200 feet deep and is cut vertically with great precision through solid rock. The sides are very smooth, and it is evidently the work of experienced miners. A stone, allowed to drop vertically, does not reach the bottom for several seconds, and then gives a dull sound as if striking earth, showing that there is no water in the mine, even at that depth. There are 2 other shafts, and they all communicate by galleries in miners' style. The hills of Los Cerrillos, San Miguel, Jemez and elsewhere contain many old mines worked by either the Spaniards or the Indians. Old mines exist at Abiquin or the Chama River. The work exhibits considerable skill in the use of tools and a familiarity with the business of mining. The roof is carefully braced where weak and old galleries are closed by well-laid walls of masonry. From the style in which the excavation is done, and from the perfect preservation of the woodwork, I attribute this and other similar mines in this region to the earlier Spanish explorers. In the neighbourhood is a considerable ancient settlement. Descending by a steep and tortuous path, we led our mules at the bottom.
And watch uninterrupted. Try YouTube Premium.
Bloody adverts, piss off. Descending by a steep and tortuous path, we left our mules at the bottom and climbed a detached masilla which stands at the junction of the two branches of the valley of the Chama, and on which is situated an ancient and ruined pueblo, once a stone-built town of considerable size. Even its name is now lost, and of the inhabitants whose busy hands constructed its walls, and whose feet in successive generations wore so deeply the thresholds of its entrance, no tradition now remains. The mesa on which it stands is some 500 feet in height. It's composed of a cellular trachyte, and the top is only to be reached by a narrow and difficult path. The houses are now in ruins, but were once numerous, and all built of dressed stone. In the town we noticed a dozen or more estufas evacuated from the solid rock. They're in circular form, 18 to 20 feet in diameter, or 10 to 12 inches deep, by 10 to 12 inches deep. They all exhibited evidence of once having been covered with wooden superstructures. In most of them, 4 excavations on opposite walls would seem to have been used as the sockets for the insertion of wooden posts. And in one, there's a niche cut in the side, with a chimney leading from it, probably the place where the sacred fire was kept perpetually burning. The style of the architecture in which this town was built, as well as the estufas, show that the inhabitants belonged to the race of Pueblo Indians, a race now nearly extinct, but once occupying every habitable part of New Mexico. In Arizona, remains of the old operations have been discovered. Various evidence of crude, prehistoric mining have been found at various times and places in what is now called Arizona. However, it is not certain that this work was done for gold, silver or copper. Discoveries made along the Salt River by Lieutenant Cushing of ancient oven furnaces in which considerable copper was found would seem to indicate that the ores treated were copper carbonates. Beyond doubt, further investigation will reveal the existence of many more ancient mining sites, as is evident from the following quotation from the Lindgren and Grattan. The Great Plains and the plateau provinces of eastern and northwestern New Mexico did not contain metalliferous deposits, except local iron and copper ores distributed in sedimentary rocks. On the other hand, the metallic ores are present in every mountain range in the territory. They occur in the continuation of the Rocky Mountain system in northern New Mexico and the Zuni Uplift in the Zandia, Magdalena, San Pedro, Manzano, San Andreas, Oscuro, Organ, Membres, and almost all of the small desert ranges of southwestern New Mexico. They also occur in the broken down edge of the Plateau province about Silver City and in several of the large rhyolite fields in the southwestern part, extending from the Mogollon Mountains into Socorro County. The matter can be approached from another angle and treated as a problem in human geography. It is unnecessary to emphasize the fact that the opening of New Mexico, Arizona, and the neighboring states was due to the discovery in the latter part of the last century of the vast stores of mineral wealth that they contain. In consequence of this, it was not long before railways began to spread their tentacles over the mining districts. Railways are the modern trade routes and show unmistakably what are the industrial districts of any new country. A study of the maps published by Hill in his bulletin on the mining districts of the western United States shows how the existence of mining settlements has decided the direction of railway lines. States with but little mineral wealth that are given over to cattle breeding are sparsely served by railways. Those with many mining settlements soon possess a network of railway lines. Sketch map numbers 10 and 11 are built up from the maps of Hill, and those provided in several volumes of the reports and bulletins of the Bureau of Ethnology. They are called sketch maps because it is impossible at the present moment to obtain exact details as to distributions. They show the mining centres as given by Hill, the railways, and the sites of past and present ruins of pueblos. These ruins are of different ages and of different kinds, but for the present purpose they are grouped together. It is evidence that modern mining centres have been served by branch lines. So I just need to change the need to turn the thingy on the display. Oh, it's on. These ruins are of different ages and of various kinds, but for the present purpose they are grouped together. It is evidence that the modern mining centres have been served by branch lines. This is the case with the mines of the Verde Valley, Arizona. The centres around Globe and Miami in Gila County, Arizona, Morenci and Metcalfe in Greenlee County, Arizona and Silver City, Santa Rita and Hanover, Grant County, New Mexico. The important mining districts around Santa Fe on the Rio Grande is well observed by railways. It is also is the mining district of Colfax County, New Mexico, which includes Elizabethtown. Another railway branch serves El Vado on the Chama, Rio Arriba County. The railway branch also extends to Farmington on the San Juan River, San Juan County, New Mexico. In Utah, a noteworthy relationship exists between railways and mining regions, as may have been seen by reference to Hill's monograph. Sorry, my nasal hair is tickling my mustache and it's driving me nuts. In practically all these cases, the railways are running into regions full of remains of native villages or ruins of some sort. This is particularly noteworthy in the case of the line running from Prescott through Phoenix to El Paso on the Rio Grande, with the exception of the upper reaches of the Salt River. It might also be thought that the distribution of ruins was really that of settlements served by the railway. It stands beyond doubt that the identity of aim must have caused such an agreement of distribution. The branch lines in the various mining regions cannot be claimed as natural routes from one place to another. They are obviously made for the transportation of raw material from the terminus, and the choice of route is based on industrial requirements. It can hardly therefore be claimed that the industrial settlements of these places were determined by climatic and other geographical circumstances. The founders of these settlements were presumably actuated by the same motives as Europeans, namely the presence of raw materials of various sorts. The same reasoning applies to the thickly populated region around Santa Fe. The agreement between the ruins and the railway lines is too close to be due to chance. It argues for identity of purpose in the minds of their authors, the desire for raw materials. The old mining activities in this region bear out the contention. Certain difficulties appear in the way of the full acceptance of the conclusions suggested by these maps. To the north and south of the railway through Gallup, sketch map number 10, in the basin of the Little Colorado, are a number of ruins which do not seem to be directly connected with any mining activities. The existence of such a large group certainly seems to stand in contradiction to the general rule. This discrepancy will have to be removed before any confidence can be placed in the new theory now being elaborated. In order to discuss the matter, it is necessary to refer to results obtained in other countries. In a paper published by the Manchester Literary and Philosophical Society, I have shown that the builders of the megaliths of England and Wales, as well as the people responsible for the long barrows, lived in certain well-defined areas of the country. The areas were those in which materials used by them in their daily life or in their industry exist in a state of nature. For example, the greatest concentrations of long barrows are in those places where flint could be obtained, that is, on the upper chalk. Similarly, the builders of the megaliths were concentrating partly on the places where they could get gold, tin, copper and other metals. On the chalk, where they could get their flint for their daily implements, and also places where they found materials for ornament such as jet, hematite and ochre. This granted, one can predict, in the case of certain forms of social organisation. From a study of the objects used, where the people would probably be settled, conversely, the materials afforded by the places where they were settled would be those used and desired by them. The Pueblo Indians do not work metals to any extent. It is said that on the Gila and Salt rivers occasionally fashioned rich copper, but they never smelted it or worked it by fire. The Pueblo Indians are also said to have used gold for ornaments, again in the Zuni Mountains. According to oral accounts, the Indians from time immemorial have been collecting copper ore from this region to adorn their persons and barter as gems or curios, and in the Smelter Gulch, on the Barite vein, described as occurring in the Copper Hill district, stands a couple of adobe smokestacks whose construction antedates the memory of the oldest settlers now living in the region. It is reported that they stood there 85 years ago just as they are today. They were evidently built for the purpose of treating ore, possibly silver, found in the barite vein, or in the copper deposits of which some are present nearby. They bear no evidence of having been used. Such activities are evidently of the past, so far as the present-day tribes are concerned, especially in the case of those which have wandered, either like the Zuni and Hopi in the Pueblo area itself, or like the Kiowa into the plains. Since they are not actively engaged in mining, it would not be expected that their migration would be determined by the presence of such things as gold and copper, for which they have little use. But it is going too far to claim that such migrating tribes did not exercise a deliberate choice of settlement. They may have had just as decided notions as to what was a suitable place for settlement as the old turquoise and gold miners, but their preference may have lain in different directions.
Crispin?
It is not wise to call in the action of impersonal natural forces as the causative agents in distributions of human settlement, before it is quite certain that the people themselves had no direct choice in the matter. This is particularly so in the case under consideration, for it is well known that the region between the headwaters of the Little Colorado and the headwaters of the Gila River contains many salt lakes and marshes, which were visited by Indian tribes from vast distances. One of the things that struck Coronado when he arrived among the Zuni Indians was their possession of quantities of excellent white salt. The getting of salt was a religious ceremony among the Indians. It was given to them by the salt old woman, which, as will be evidenced later, is direct evidence of the influence of the people of the archaic civilization. Cushing states emphatically that the settlement of the Zuni and other Pueblo Indians near the salt lakes of south-central New Mexico was due to their desire for the salt. The Tanoans so far prized their comparatively inferior source of salt supply in the salinas of Manzano as to have been induced to settle there and surround them with a veritable cordon of their pueblos. Among the Zuni, at the present time, the south is in the direction of the salt-containing water or lake. Thus, it is possible to claim that the desire for salt determined the distribution of these people. Other cases have to be decided. Lost my place, hang on. Other cases have to be decided. The Tusayan district inhabited by the Hopi Indians did not seem to afford any material substance that would attract settlers. Again, the great distribution of ruins in the San Juan drainage may be due to the existence of gold gravels, for gold exists in the watershed of the rivers on which many of these settlements were made. These cases must, however, be left on one side. It must be remembered, nevertheless, that the need for various sorts of stone for the manufacture of domestic implements and utensils of various kinds of basic rocks probably influenced native settlement to some extent. For instance, the Pueblo peoples used obsidian for knives. Obsidian was worked somewhat extensively in the mountains of northern New Mexico, in Nevada and Arizona, and the Pacific states are exceedingly rich in this material. And, although no important quarries have been located, there can be but little question that such exist. The problem will have to be attacked in detail before it can be said to have been solved in a satisfactory manner. The run of the evidence, however, is in the direction of supporting the theory that the first food-producing occupants of the country must have come from a place where mining was actively prosecuted. Although difficulties meet the attempt to account for all the settlements in the Pueblo region, yet if it be conceded that modern railways, even branch lines, run into regions full of ruins of pueblos, it is difficult to contest the truth of the general principle just enunciated. It may well happen that further extensions of railways in this region will make the correspondence still closer. The explanation puts forward The explanation put forward. Oh God, where's it gone? The explanation put forward fits the facts without any difficulty. How else can we explain why men built great dwellings crazily perched on the precipitous sides of deep canyons that had to be approached by long ladders reaching hundreds of feet up the sides in an arid and inhospitable country when the whole of the United States was open to them? Their actions betray the existence of a strong incentive, and the desire for gold, turquoise, and other substances supplies it. California possesses traces of ancient mining. Turquoise was worked in San Bernardino County. Professor Whitney, in a work on the auriferous gravels of the Sierra Nevada, to which I have not had access, discusses remains found in gold-bearing gravels of this region.
And it's being able to get to that point in as little as 3 weeks.
Sorry. In this region. I quote from an article by Dr. Southall, which quotes Professor Whitney. He gives a list of the objects which have been found in the gravel, comprising 1. A mortar found in pay gravel under volcanic matter at the depth of 150 feet at San Andreas. 2. A stone hatchet, triangular in shape, size 4 inches round, 6 inches long, with a hole through it for a handle, found in the mouth of a tunnel, locality Table Mountain, Tuolumne, I don't know how to pronounce that, Tuolumne County. 3. A large number of mortars, pestles, stone dishes with bones of elephant and mastodon at Murphy's, Tuolumne County. 4. Bones of a human skeleton found in clay at a depth of 38 feet by Dr. H. Boyce at Placerville. 5. Numerous stone relics, mortars, grooved discs, etc. at various depths. The men who made these relics were not at the cultural level of the present-day Californian Indians. They were far above it. They made out of granite mortars and dishes of perfect form. Weighing from 20 to 40 pounds and 12 inches in diameter. They also used a vessel made of lava, hard as iron, circular in form, with 3 legs and a spout, and polished stone axes perforated with a hole. And the interesting thing about these remains is that, as Bancroft says, they seem in almost every instance to have been found by miners in their search for gold. The explanation given by Dr. Southall in his paper seems to me to be the only possible one. He points out that these remains always seem to be found in the auriferous gravels, and he goes on to say that 1,000 years perhaps before Cortez landed in Mexico, the Toltec civilization flourished in Central America, in Anahuac and on the Pacific coast, and centuries before the palaces of the Montezuma glittered with the precious metals. The precursors of the Aztecs had mined into the auriferous gravels of the Sierra Nevada and the Sacramento Valley. These relics were evidently left where they had been found by the gold hunters. It is possible, on the basis of this discussion, to turn to Pueblo and the Maya country. If, as it seems, the Pueblo region was colonized from Mexico, what were the Maya and Mexicans doing in their own country? And how did they choose their original sites for settlement? In order to answer this question, I shall have to use indirect evidence. Sketch map number 12 shows the relationship between the important groups of ruins of Mexico, as given by Lumholtz, Joyce and Bancroft, and the railway lines. It is significant that judging the region from New Mexico to South Mexico as a whole, the railways are plentiful in the basin of the Gila River in New Mexico and Arizona, and then sparse for a great distance when they begin to proliferate, and that ruins should be plentiful in both cases where the railway lines begin to throw out several branches. As in the Pueblo region, branch lines run into places with ruins, as that to Oaxaca, that to Mezcala, less definitely, and that to Pascaro. While the proliferation of branches near Mexico cities agrees well with that of ruins. Even the apparent exceptions can be explained. The names of the Placeres del Oro tells its own tale, in the view of the fact that, as Sahagan states, the Mexicans never washed river gravels for gold. The ruins in Veracruz The ruins in Veracruz are in a state which is notable for the presence of pearl-bearing freshwater mussels, on a greater scale than elsewhere in Mexico. The Mexican used much pearl shell and many pearls. Only recently, Mrs. Zelia Nuttall has discovered, on top of a pyramid in Mexico, a great depth of pearl shell, in the midst of which were burials. So it is possible that the pearls of Veracruz attracted the people of old, but they have not been so successful in attracting modern men as to cause them to build railways. There may be other explanations for the Mexican railways that can be adduced, but railways are made to make money, which is not done in Mexico by passenger traffic. The branches in Oaxaca and elsewhere were certainly made on account of the mineral traffic. The similar motives presumably caused the men of the archaic civilization to settle in the same districts. The question of the more homely raw materials must not be forgotten when considering the problem of the early colonization of a country. In the case of Mexico, obsidian, so widely used for the manufacture of knives, may have determined certain settlements, as is shown by Miss Zelia Nuttall. Hardly an occupied site in all Mexico and Central America can be found that does not furnish examples of obsidian implements or fragments. The flake knife is the simplest and most universal of the flaked forms, and occurs in great numbers in and about the Valley of Mexico. The immense refuse deposits of the ancient city of Tenochtitlan, now the city of Mexico, are in places literally black with broken knives, and the San Juan Teotihuacan furnishes an apparently inexhaustible supply of these and other forms of implements. Since the stone is found in the San Juan River, the settlement was probably due to its presence. Indeed, it is probably that the existence of obsidian determined many of the old settlements in this part of America. Mrs. Zelia Nuttall had a suggestive article concerning the stone called Chalchihuitl by the Mexicans, a kind of jade. This formed one of the forms of tribute paid by the coast tribes of the Mexicans, the others being gold and turquoise. Mrs. Nuttall gives a long list of such places. The actual existence of towns in regions which anciently paid tribute to the Chalchihuitl beads to Montezuma, and of districts whose names incorporate the word Chalchihuitl, undoubtedly constitute a most valuable indication which deserves serious consideration by those interested in the possibility of finding jadeite in place. I apologise if I'm pronouncing all these words completely wrong. My fantastic camera freezing again. It is noteworthy too that, as Mrs. Nuttall mentions, the Chiapas, the region where the Maya civilization has its origin, there is a place called the land of Chalchihuitl. The argument from railways cannot be applied to the Maya country, for none have yet been made there. Sketchmap number 13 shows the distribution of the early Maya cities. Some are in the basin of the Usumacinta River. Copan and Quirigua are in the basin of the Motagua River, and the rest are in Honduras and Yucatan, which last country was the scene of the later Maya history, where they have been driven from their early home. The settlements of Copan and Quirigua may possibly be explained because of the Montagua River is said to be the most important gold river in that part of America. The earliest settlements of the Usumacinta River basin are close to the banks of rivers, which suggests design. The Usumacinta is by far the most noteworthy pearl-bearing river in Mexico and Central America, for it contains several varieties of the pearl-bearing freshwater mussel. It is said, further, by Simpson, that pearl-bearing mussels exist in Honduras, but the information is not precise. The Maya used pearls both at Copan and in the Honduras and Yucatan settlements, but none have been found in the Guatemalan sites. It may be, therefore, that pearls played some part in the settlement of Honduras. Attention has already been called to the enormous number of mounds that exist in the mound area of the United States, particularly in the basins of the Mississippi, Ohio, Tennessee, and Cumberland rivers. In South Michigan, South Minnesota, Florida, Western New York, the mounds are sparse along the Atlantic seaboard districts, and they soon disappear once the Mississippi is crossed in the westward direction. They do not persist far north of the Great Lakes. It is probable that they exist in some numbers in Texas, which archaeologically is but little explored. If that be so, a continuous distribution exists from Mexico to the eastern states. Right, I'm to go to the toilet and stuff. Just gonna come in the chat room. See, I've got absolutely no idea how many people are here. If there's anybody here, 5 people. Whee! Just JP, Catherine. The sound is very low. No, Nath. The sound's very low. Probably the music's quite low. But I'm looking at the... Check your volume, Catherine, because it's coming out almost maximum. I can see it on the... you know, it's nearly redlining, so I'm nearly clipping, so it's coming out maximum. So see if it's your volume, just to see, because I know I've done that in the past. I have the volume's not been turned up. You're on max 2. What about for you, JP? What's it like? I can turn it. I can turn it up. It's just I don't want to clip it out, you know. Is that better? Is that louder for you? Yeah, I think I've fixed the screen. So I am I'm going to stop this music. And I made a little video for a little break. So, go and go to the toilet and make yourself a cup of tea and roll a cigarette or a joint, whatever you want to do, and we'll be approximately 10 minutes. Alright?
Running from our veins, going to waste. Now I'm 'cause I got so much love running through my veins. Go to place. That is why I feel real love, feel the love never after. The whole of my soul, you can see it in my face. It's a real big place. Come on, hold my head. Why can't I go living? That's the way I understand. That's who I've been given. That's who I understand. That's who I understand. Not sure I understand. Mr. Robbie Williams, there we go. Thank you very much. Is that Phil Collins? I've not done this one for a while. She goes out to the man on the street, so can help it. Just call and nowhere to sleep. Is this somewhere you can tell me? He walks on, doesn't look back. He pretends he can't hear her. Starts to whistle as he crosses the street. He's embarrassed to be there. Oh, think twice, 'cause it's another day for you and me in paradise. Oh, think twice, it's just another day for you, you and me in paradise. She calls out to the man on the street. Can see she's been crying. She's got blisters on the soles of her feet. She can't walk, but she's trying. Oh, think twice. It's just another day for you and me in paradise. Oh, think twice. This is another day for you, you and me in paradise. Just think about it. Just think about it. Oh no, there's nothing more anybody can do. Oh Lord, there must be something you can say. You can tell from the lines on her face. You can see that she's been there. Probably been moved on from every place, 'cause she didn't fit in there. There we go, Mr. Phil Collins. Lovely. Well, I just want to do this one as well. If it's alright, it's not Phil Collins.
Really need to take my mic off mute. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed the break. I'm going to finish this chapter 7, and then call it a night. I'll read the next chapter tomorrow. Sketch map number 3 does not show all the mounds, but it is sufficiently detailed to make the reader realise the great extent of the mound building civilization. If a careful examination can be made of the original map, it will be found that no mound is situated far from a riverbank. It can be seen from the sketch map produced here that this is true in the general sense. It is also true in detail. What can have led men all over this wide area, practically universally, to settle in close proximity to water? I suggest that the cause was the search for pearls and pearl shell. It needs a detailed examination of the monograph of Simpson to realise the number of varieties of pearl-bearing freshwater mussels that exist in the mound area. The details are so numerous that it is impossible to plot them on a map. Nevertheless, certain general principles can be derived from the mass of details. The great bulk of the mussels are found in the basins of the Mississippi, Ohio, Tennessee, Cumberland, Tombigbee, Chattahoochee, Flint, Savannah, and Altamaha rivers. Also in the St. Lawrence and Atlantic drainages, and in South Michigan and North Florida. The distribution of pearl mussels therefore agrees closely with that of mounds. When the Mississippi is crossed, the number both of pearls and of mounds rapidly lessens, so that although mounds are fairly plentiful in Arkansas, Missouri, Iowa and Minnesota, especially within reach of the Mississippi, they soon vanish in Indian Territory, Kansas, Nebraska and the Dakotas. While the pearl-bearing mussels disappear in like manner, they are fairly plentiful in Arkansas, along the Little Red, White and Current rivers. But beyond a few references to Kansas, they practically are not noted in the more westerly states of the plains. The distribution of mounds and of pearl-bearing freshwater mussels supports the contention that the mound builders appreciated pearls and pearl shell and were largely determined in their movements by the presence of these things. Mr. Jackson has shown that in various parts of the mound region many pearls have been found with burials of the mound builders. The valuable paper by Willoughby on the Indians of Virginia shows what great value they placed on pearls and other things. He describes the process of mummification of the kings. They were first disemboweled, then the skin was laid back, and the flesh cut from the bones. Strachey says that this was dried over the fire into ashes and preserved in little pots. Harriet tells us it was dried in the sun and preserved in mats, which were placed at the feet. The skeleton, still fastened together by ligaments, was enclosed again in its skin and stuffed with white sand, or with pearls, copper, beads, and such trash sewed in a skin. Upon it were placed bracelets, copper ornaments, and strings of pearl and beads. Thus prepared, the remains were wrapped in a white-dressed skin, and lastly rolled in mats and laid orderly, one by one, as they die in their turns. The riches accumulated during life, such as beads, pearls, and copper, together with his tobacco pipe and any object especially valued during life, were placed in baskets and deposited at the feet. More than once mention is made in this account of the great value placed on pearls as well as copper by these people. Jackson quotes from Streeter with regard to the Florida Indians. As in Cleopatra's time in Egypt, so in Florida. The graves of the kings were decorated with pearls. Soto's soldiers found in one of their temples great wooden coffins in which the dead lay embalmed, and beside them were small baskets full of pearls. The temple of Ptolemy, however, was the richest in pearls. Its high walls and roof were of mother of pearl, while strings of pearl and plumes of feathers hung around the walls. Over the coffins of their large kings hung their shields, crowned with pearls, and in the centre of the temple stood vases full of costly pearls. The use of pearls, therefore, by the mound builders and by the tribes of Columbian times, stands beyond doubt, and its ceremonial nature shows that the people attracted great importance to them. So, if the peoples responsible for the mounds came to the United States for pearls and other valuables, it follows that their most important settlements would be in the areas richest in what they most desired. I shall now adduce evidence to show that the most important mound region was that characterized by the richest profusion of substances appreciated by the people of Mexico and elsewhere in pre-Columbian times. Cyrus Thomas wrote the words of Dr. Joseph Jones. After a somewhat lengthy review of the various kinds of burial practiced by the Aborigines of America, he arrives at the following conclusions. We have carefully examined all of the modes of burial practiced by the American Aborigines in extenso, and it is evident that the ancient race of Tennessee is distinguished from all others by the peculiar method of interment in rude stone coffins. Whilst the custom of burying the dead in the sitting posture was almost universal with the various tribes and nations of North and South America, the ancient inhabitants of Tennessee and Kentucky buried mostly commonly in long stone graves, with the body resting at length, as among civilized nations of the present day in Europe and America. Cyrus Thomas goes on to comment, since the publication of Dr. F. Jones' paper, much additional information in regard to these graves has been obtained, and in the area in which they occur has been greatly extended. But the result has been, as will be seen in the sequel, rather to confirm than to disprove the opinion here expressed. Graves of the same character have been observed in northern Georgia, in the lower portions of eastern Tennessee, and in the valley of the Delaware River, at various points in Ohio and in southern Illinois. Yet, strange as it may seem, in all these places were at one time or another occupied by the same people who formerly dwelt in the Cumberland Valley, or by closely allied tribes. Later, he states that the Cumberland Valley and Middle Tennessee constituted the chief home of the people who buried in stone graves of the peculiar form mentioned, with whom he connects the Shawnee and Delaware tribes. He sums up a long discussion of this manner in the following terms. Taking all these corroborating facts together, there are reasonable grounds for concluding that graves of the type now under consideration, although found in widely separated localities, are attributable to the Shawnee Indians and their congeners, and Delawares and Illinois, and that those south of the Ohio are due entirely to the first named tribe. Thus he claims that the mound builders are definitely linked to the Indians of post-Columbian times, and any careful reader of his arguments is, it seems to me, bound to agree with him. Another important fact emerges from the study of mounds containing stone graves. In a group of mounds at Cartersville, Georgia, called the Etowah Mounds, certain remarkable figured coppered plates and engraved shells have been found. It is apparent to everyone who will inspect the figures that in all the leading characters the designs are suggestive of a Mexican or Central American origin. In fact, there can be no doubt that they were derived in some way from these more civilized countries, either directly or, as is more probable, indirectly. It is perhaps doubtful that Cyrus Thomas points out whether the copper plates may not perhaps be of European origin. But he notes at the same time that the copper plates have only been found in the mounds with stone graves. Cyrus Thomas comments on the use of shell for ornament and says that the ornamented shells are found in all parts of Tennessee, except the extreme western portion, in western North Carolina and in northern Georgia, the extreme northern part of Alabama, southeastern Missouri, southern Illinois, and in Virginia, especially the extreme southwestern part. But western North Carolina, eastern and middle Tennessee, especially the Cumberland Valley, are the places where they have been found in the greatest numbers. He continues thus. The chief difficulty which arises in connection with these shells is the fact that a few of them bear undoubted Mexican designs, which pertain to pre-Columbian times. For example, those found in the Big Taco Mound. The Mexican origin of the designs is admitted by everyone who sees them, yet the proof that this mound was built and used by the Cherokees is so strong as scarcely to admit of a doubt. How these two facts are to be reconciled is a problem not easily solved. Other strong reasons can be given for the presence of people with undoubted Mexican culture in this region. It is well known that the Appalachians contained much gold, especially in the states of Tennessee, West Virginia, North and South Carolina, and Georgia, and in the days of Columbus they were inhabited by the Cherokee, Creek, Chickasaw, and Shawnee tribes, which are all claimed to have strong culture links with the mound builders. It is certain that gold mines were worked here in the past, but the problem is obscured by two facts. First of all, it is well known that the Spaniards worked gold mines in this region. Also, it is probable that the first seekers got their gold from the gravels of the riverbeds, and thus all traces of their work may well have disappeared. At the time of the Spaniards, it seems certain that the natives of this region knew of the gold, and the early writers described the manner in which it was got by them from the river gravels. The Indian tribes were living in a country watered by rivers full of gold. The Cherokee called the Chattahoochee River by that name because in its bed there are many rubies. It and the Chestatee River, as well as many others running through their territory, are well stocked with gold in the gravels. The following quotation is from Locke's Gold. The following quotation from Locke's Gold makes it clear that the native tribes had certain knowledge of the wealth of their homeland. Old chroniclers gave an account of a province called Cofachiqui, which was visited by the Spaniard de Soto's gold hunting expedition in 1538-40, and which was embraced in what afterwards became the states of Florida, Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi, and according to Logan, had its center on the western limits of South Carolina. Its capital and chief town stood upon the tongue of land between the broad rivers of Georgia and the Savannah, just opposite the modern district of Abbeville. The Spaniards entered this capital after a 2 months' march, and there found hatchets formed from an alloy of gold and copper. At this their cupidity was greatly excited, and they concluded that they had found a country abounding in the long-coveted precious deposits of gold, and so, indeed, they had. Less than 6 miles southeast of the town, on the opposite or Carolina side of the river, lay one of the most extraordinary gold deposits in the world. The Cherokees were well acquainted with the Dawn mine. This is shown by the numerous relics of their handiwork scattered around it, and there can be little doubt that the massive nuggets of its outcropping gold supplied them abundantly with the finer metal of the alloy that so attracted the Spaniards. It is no less well known that the gold and copper found in the possession of the Indians in the form of solid masses or curious trinkets by the first white men who visited the country were obtained from these sources. He goes on to say, these chronicles and traditions go to confirm what Lawson says, that the Indians from time immemorial were acquainted with the valuable mines of gold and silver in Upper Carolina. These emphatic words of Locke show that the Indians of the goldfield were engaged in working the stores of metals that existed there, and that their capital was, as he says, situated near one of the most extraordinary gold deposits in the world. Now, since the Indians, who had such close cultural associations with the mound builders, knew of the gold in their midst, and worked it, it seems beyond doubt, for this reason alone, that the mound builders also exploited the mines. The mound builders worked other sources of wealth. There are traces of mining over a wide area from Lake Superior to Mexico. The skill which is shown, and the knowledge of the situation of the veins, as well as the patience and perseverance necessary to do so much work, all prove that it was the performance of a people more civilized than our aborigines. Near Lake Superior are numerous traces of copper workings. It is along the edges or outcrops of these veins that the ancients dug copper in great quantities, leaving, as external evidences of their industry, large trenches, now partly filled with rubbish, but well defined, with a breadth of 10 to 15 feet and a variable depth of 5 to 20 feet. In one place, the inclined roof, or upper wall, work is supported by a natural pillar which is left standing, being wrought around, but no marks of tools are visible. In another case, east of the recent works, is a case where they have wrought along the vein a few feet without taking away the top or the outside vein of veinstone. The rubbish has been cleared away in one spot to a depth of 20 feet to the bottom of the trench. The agent found in one pit at about 18 feet in depth, measuring along the inclined face or flow of the vein, a mass of native copper supported on a cobweb of timber, principally the black oak of these mountains, but which the ancient miners had not been able to raise out of the pit. The sticks on which it rested were not rotten, but very soft and brittle, having been covered for centuries by standing water, of which the pit was full at all times. They were from 5 to 6 inches in diameter and had the marks of a narrow axe or hatchet about 1 3/4 of an inch in length. They had raised it 2 or 3 feet by means of wedges, and then abandoned it on account of its great weight, which was 11,658 pounds, or nearly 6 tons. They used stone hammers and mauls. They also used fire in their work. With these apparently inadequate means, they have cut a very tough, compact rock that almost defies the skill of modern miners, and the strength of powder for many miles in a continuous line, and in many places 2, 3, and 4 adjacent lines. It is well known that copper mines exist in Tennessee. The many relics of mining operations in the shape of tools and workings on copper, lead, and zinc veins in the state would seem to indicate that the Spaniards had once been engaged in mining operations, not for these base metals, but with the expectation of finding gold and silver. The Spaniards very likely went to places already worked by the natives, so the copper found in the Etowah mounds may well have been mined by the mound builders. In maintaining that the mound builders were attracted to the Appalachians not only by the pearls, but also by the stores of mineral wealth that existed there, I am making a claim that it is hard to substantiate in one particular. For, so far as I am aware, no gold has been found in the mounds. The Cherokee and other native races evidently knew of the presence of gold in their streams and gave information which attracted the Spaniards. Since a continuity exists between the natives and the mound builders, it is permissible to look upon this as presumptive evidence of the appreciation of gold on the part of the mound builders. The task of accounting for its absence presents no insuperable difficulty. The remains of any goldfield would find no gold there, except that which the gold seekers had overlooked. Goldfields are usually worked in order to remove the metal, not to use it on the spot. The Mexican connections of the Etowah mounds suggest strongly that the Mexicans were the instigators of the industry, and they naturally would remove all the gold. The presence of such highly civilized strangers could not fail to raise the natives in cultural level. This would account for the appearance of carved articles apparently beyond the powers of the Indians. The facts, when assembled, suggest, therefore, that the mounds of the Appalachian goldfield present cultural features that connect them more closely with Mexico than any other mounds of the states. Further, these mounds are themselves connected with the most advanced Indian peoples, the Delawares, Cherokee, and Shawnee. This region, as will be shown later by additional evidence, was one of the hiving-off places whence swarms of Indians went out to seek fresh homes, who, as they went, dropped still more of the old culture that they had derived from the early gold seekers of the Appalachians. A reason can therefore be assigned for the distribution of the mounds that accounts for it in a way that no other explanation has accomplished. It suggests that the search for gold, pearls and copper led the mound builders to the localities where they found these things, and that they ignored other places probably equally well suited for habitation. In fact, their motives were similar to those of modern men. If a study be made of the behaviour of the Spaniards after their conquest of America, it will be found that their movements were obviously controlled by the reports of supplies of gold. If we go back in imagination 3 centuries and picture to ourselves the most striking characteristic which the aspect of Europe then presented, we shall behold a universal excitement caused by the discovery of a new continent, which has been brought to light by a Genoese navigator, whose genius and persistent daring have been stimulated by a lucky miscalculation of the geographical position of China. In this new world, to which Columbus had traced the path, not merely for Castile and Leon, as is alleged in the inscription placed on the tomb by the tardy gratitude of posterity, but the whole civilized world, mines of gold and afterwards of silver, especially the latter, of unheard of riches, presented themselves to the cupidity of the conquerors. The most enterprising spirits of the Iberian Peninsula hastened across the ocean to possess themselves of treasures, the splendour of which had been engaged in their excited imaginations. And they were followed by a multitude of daring adventurers from all parts of Europe, who precipitated themselves on the coasts of America, all in the quest of mines of gold and silver. Small wonder that they arrived in the Pueblo region and in the Appalachians in their quest for gold, there to find in both places a highly developed civilization. If the motive was the search for gold in the one case, it is hard to see what other motive can be adduced in the other. The Spaniards found the places where gold and pearls existed, so did the mound builders. It is therefore legitimate to claim that the early settlements in the North American goldfields were made by men deliberately seeking for wealth. Reliance must not be placed solely on the presence of gold and pearls and copper to account for the whole distribution of the mounds. These people used other materials, flint, chert, mica, and so on, the need of which would determine in some measure the distribution of their settlements. For instance, mica was in very general use among the Indian tribes east of the Great Plains, and was mined by them at points in the Appalachian Highlands from Georgia to the St. Lawrence River. From these mines it passed by trade or otherwise to remote parts of the country, and is found more especially in burial mounds, stone graves and ordinary burials in the Gulf states and throughout the Mississippi Valley. Mica is also found in workable forms in Dakota and southwestern Arkansas, but it is not known to have been mined by the Aborigines in these sections. Many mounds contain burials associated with mica. Atwater describes the discovery of a burial at Circleville, Ohio, a sheet of mica 36 inches in length by 18 inches in width and 1.5 inches thick. Other similar finds were made by Atwater at the same region, with a skeleton in the Grave Creek Mound near Wheeling. WVA 150 discs of sheet mica measuring 1.5 to 2 inches in diameter and having 1 or 2 perforations were found. These were probably suspended as tinkling pendants on some part of the costume. The mica mines covered a wide area. No definite idea of the number of ancient diggings can be formed, but they were numerous and widely distributed over the South Appalachian region. But that they were numerous and widely distributed over the South Appalachian region cannot be questioned. Western North Carolina claiming the largest number. When it is remembered that the natives were, at the time of Columbus, actively engaged in mining for flint, chert, steatite, mica, catlinite, hematite, copper, silver, and gold, fire clay, pigment materials, salt, and so forth, it is evident that much work will have to be done before it is possible to state that climatic or other geographical conditions have influenced the people in their choice of settlement. The great workshops of Flint Ridge, Licking, and Muskingum counties, Ohio, give an idea of the industry of the peoples. The extent of the ancient operations is almost beyond belief and can be realized only imperfectly by those who have not visited the locality. To say that hundreds of acres of the undulating surface of the plateau have been dug over and countless trenches and pits opened to the depth of from 5 to 25 feet, often so closely placed as to coalesce with the various groups, does not leave an adequate impression upon the mind. The great marvel is that the Aborigines even accomplished the work of which such abundant traces remain, and only those who have ventured to remove a small mass of the flint from its place can realize the appalling difficulty of their work. Even to men with tools of steel, get out of there. Even to men with tools of steel unaided by powerful explosives. These quotations show that the native tribes of the United States were organized on a complicated industrial basis, and that their industrial needs, beyond any doubt, played an important part in the determination of their distribution. I am convinced that a careful survey of the whole country will reveal correlations between settlements and sources of raw materials as exact as those already discovered in the case of early settlements of England and Wales. Right. Itchy nose. So, we'll leave it there. We will leave it there. Thank you very much for being here and sitting and listening. I will come into the chat room quickly and see who's about. Hey, Crypto Alchemist, how you doing? Just JP, good to see you. DN, good to see you, mate. Catherine, I said hey, haven't I? Nathan. Nice one. Thank you. Oh, Sergeant Bunbun, if you're still here, mate. Thank you very much. It's it's just really, really interesting stuff. This book. It's like I'm enjoying it. I am enjoying it. But I'm gonna have to take the dogs out for a walk now and then go to bed. And I'm gonna carry on tomorrow, and we'll do from here, Oceania, and I'll read for an hour or two. Thank you very much. I love you loads, and I will see you. I will see you tomorrow. Hang on, just trying to find my Right. Thank you very much, peeps. See you later.
The higher you build your barriers, the taller I become. The farther you take my rights away. The higher you build your barriers, the taller I become. The higher you build your barriers, the taller I become. The farther you take my rights away, the faster I will run. You can deny me, you can decide to turn your face away. No matter, something inside so strong, and